commercial city of Onitsha comes Udala Radio 104.7 FM, the voice of the region, where authentic news and entertainment meet. Udala Radio 104.7 FM, seriously authentic.
When politics unfolds, when decisions are made, we reveal the impact. Welcome to the Polity, your deep dive into the forces shaping governance, policies, and power. From the halls of government.
You were there. I was not there. Check the record. Wait now. You were there. I was not there.
To the voices of the people.
We are suffering. This suffering is too much. It's too much. Look at the students. There's no job. They finish school. There's no job for them.
We analyze the undercurrents, expose the intrigues, and break down the narratives that define our democracy. Dr. Tony Olisa Mbeki delivering razor-sharp analysis, and Ibuka Franklin and Chisom on the question wheel, driving the conversation. We bring you the most compelling discussions on governance, policies, and power plays. Stay informed, stay engaged, stay ahead. The Polity, every weekdays at 9:15 a.m. Exclusive on Udala 104.7 FM Onitsha.
Okay, 60 minutes past 9 a.m. and you're listening to the Radio 104.7 FM. Welcome to the Polity, Tuesday edition, March 3rd, 2026. My name is Franklin Beck, and welcome once more to today's edition of this very program on the seriously authentic radio station, transmitting from the commercial nerve center of Anambra State on nature and the home of Main Market. This very morning, we have a couple of things for us to look at as they are reported in various newspapers this very morning. Of course, if you check the papers, you will see that the case between El Rufai and the ICPC is getting attention. Most papers have that very story. Talk about the crisis ongoing in the Middle East, where US and Israel have teamed up to be bombing Iran. It's also making headlines on various newspapers. Of course, US government has given her citizens in Nigeria directive or advisory on how to move out in Nigeria in the face of the protests being done by Shiite Muslims in some part of Nigeria. There are other developments too. There is this story emanating from sources within DSS saying that the man who went on X to threaten former governor of Anambra State, Peter Obi, has been arrested. DSS is saying that he was able to conduct some forensic research and was able to track down the person who was behind that threatening tweet. There are some other developments you can check on the paper this very morning, and interestingly, some of them are going to be making our discussion this very morning. So at this point in time, let's bring in Tony, the in-house analyst. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning to you, Franklin Ebuka. Good morning, Nigerians. Good morning, the good people of Southeast. Good morning, Ndi Anambra. Good morning, Ndi Onitsha. Donidu. Good morning, Ndi Osimo. Good morning, Ndi Afia, Ndi Onitsha Main Market. Good morning, Ndi Oloyibo. Good morning, Ndi Nanyi Fobuna Nanyanya. The transporters, those in the transportation industry, we say good morning to you, and we say good morning to everyone. For those who are in the hospitals, we must also recognize them. The retired, the veterans, are also security operatives. Everyone, you are welcome to this very program. Today is a very beautiful Tuesday morning, the third day in the month of March in the year 2026, and we thank God Almighty for His mercy, for His grace, for His love, and for His eternal grace which He has been showering upon us. We are happy to see this day, and we are ready to go. Just sit back and enjoy the program.
Okay, you can join the program on our Facebook page, Udala Radio 104.7 FM. Get on this very page and join the conversation. You can share the video, you can like the page, you can as well drop your comment. And don't forget that while you're dropping your comments, don't omit your location. That is very important to us. You can also join on our X and the YouTube channels at Udala Radio. Let's get interactive on those platforms. So this very morning, we'll begin with the headlines we have on the 4 newspapers. Before us today, we have The Nation, The Punch, The Guardian, and Vanguard newspaper. So we'll begin with the headlines we have on The Nation newspaper. This one says the president of Botswana appoints Akinwole as a vice chairman of Botswana Power Corporation's board of directors. That tells you how Nigerians are making waves outside the country. Some of them are big hitters, but when it comes to appointment in Nigeria, nobody gets to recognize them other than career politicians. Another headline on The Nation says Wiki accuses Atiku and Obi of playing to gallery. That story can be found on page 3 of The Nation newspaper. Yesterday was his usual media chat where he spoke about a couple of things, including the curfew he imposed on FCT before the area council election and other things. And guess what? Wiki said that he remains an unchanged ally of Mr. President. In fact, he vowed that he will continue to support Mr. President. But at the same time, he said he remains a loyal member of PDP and he's going to salvage the party. So I don't know how he manages to Chelakana Wunyan at the same time. U.S. Israel versus Iran. Chaos spreads in Middle East. The story is on page 30. I saw a story somewhere. Somebody was asking questions about what could happen or what could have happened if Iran is going to be allowed to go on to enrich its nuclear ability unchecked. Because between Saturday and now, Iran has launched attack in about 11 countries in a bid to target U.S. and the Israel asset. And people are asking questions, if they can launch attacks in this very indiscriminate manner, what are they going to do if they have access to, to nukes or, all this nuclear weapon that U.S. and other countries are trying to have a control on? Okay, so leaving that very story, of course, we have to look at other headlines we have on the front page of the Nation newspaper. This one says, Dawes Island oil field secures $109 million funding for development plan. And that story says this will take office tomorrow as 23rd IG after council clearance. That story is on the front page. Yesterday was police council meeting where the appointment of this was unanimously ratified. Now phone shift student loan application deadline. The story is on page 4. Forensic team exhumes 105 bodies in Yewata. Forensic team exhumes 105 bodies in Yewata. That story can be found on page 27 of the Nation newspaper. Executive order on remittances. A Dune panel swings into action. That's a big story on the front page of the Nation newspaper. It has some riders. Oil and gas firms get transition period for payment. Governors back transparent, accountable initiative. Process of PIA amendment begins. NAF airstrike. Kill is swap commander. That story is on page 27. Reps to regulate mobile money operations. The story can be found on page 7 of the Nation newspaper. So we move over to the Punch to see the headlines we have there. Beside the nameplate is a story about ICPC and the El-Rufai. And the headline says, ICPC list documents, devices seized from El-Rufai's Abuja home. Check page 7. Israel-Iran tensions. U.S. alerts citizens in Nigeria as shared protest rocks Lagos. That story can be found on pages 2 and 36 of Punch newspaper. It has 3 riders. Police heighten security after Kano, Bauchi, Gombe, Yobe demonstrations. Protesters condemn strikes, vow peaceful rally amidst global tensions. Crisis grounds hundreds of Nigerian passengers. Another story we have on the front page of the Punch says, Atiku Sound resigns from Fintiri's cabinet. Page 7. US-based Nigerian jailed 19 years over $4 million romance scam fraud. Okay? US-based Nigerian jailed 19 years over $4 million romance scam fraud. That story can be found on page 5. Petrol may hit 1,000 naira per litre as Dangote hikes price. Check page 36 of the Punch. Revised executive order, FG adjusts oil revenue remittance framework. That story is on page 2. It has a rider, NMPC to continue crude lifting sales on behalf of government. And Tinubu to swear in this was IG Wednesday. That story is on page 25 of the Punch newspaper. Over to the Guardian. Guardian has a couple of headlines, and one of them says services disrupted as UCH unions begin 5-day strike over power rationing. The story is on page 7. I must say that the state of power now in the country is quite epileptic. Or let's talk about the Southeast, because I have asked people questions about the experiences in Oka, for instance, on the Champo, Busi, just these areas, and nobody's giving me anything, commendable about the power situation. They said it's been very epileptic and very poor. So I don't know whether there's any issue ongoing that has not been communicated to Nigerians. Another headline here says NNPC loses power to collect 30% PSCs as EO9 takes off. That is Executive Order 9. That story is on page 4 of the Guardian. And the headline says El Rufai's family replies ICPC on wiretapping secret document. El Rufai's family replies ICPC on wiretapping secret document. That story is on page 4. Yesterday there was this report that was published by Nation newspaper claiming that a source in ICP disclosed that they were able to recover wiretapping equipment in the house of El Rufai when they went for search. But El Rufai's son has replied to that, saying that nothing like that happened, nothing like that was recovered. And later yesterday, we now saw a comprehensive statement from ICPC detailing the items that were recovered. And in what ICPC listed officially, no wiretapping equipment was listed in that very one. You can read that story on page 6 of the Guardian newspaper. Tropical disease prevention, drug shortage, funding cuts. Tropical disease prevention, drug shortage, funding cuts put 100 million Nigerians NTD gains at risk. DSS arrests suspect behind Obi Oyegun's assassination attempt. This story is on page 28. Middle East war sends crude higher, fears fresh inflation risk in Nigeria. The story is on page 6. Nigeria's net reserves rise by 772% in 2 years to $34.8 billion. It's on page 15. Chaos lingers as cashless toll enforcement leaves airport road users stranded. The story is on page 5. Fintiri formally joins APC, declares Cell party leader. It can be seen on page 28. Group condemns rising wave of suicide-themed skit by Nigerian content creator. The story is on page 7. Perhaps they are referring to the kind of content that was put out by the one they call King Michu and Very Dark Man, where they supposedly drank a bleaching agent and died. I don't know. I don't know how we have managed to elevate foolishness in the name of influencing or social media influencing. Because watching those skits, I was asking myself, is it how low we have sunk in this issue of our core social media influencing and rivalry? Okay, so let's go over to Vanguard newspaper and look at the headlines there. And on Vanguard, we have Middle East war. No distress calls yet from Nigerians in Iran. Federal government is one saying so. The story can be found on page 5 of Vanguard. It has riders. Shiite protest attracts. Shiite protest attacks on Iran in Lagos. Conflict spread to Lebanon as Iran strikes Saudi Arabia. Qatar energy site. Kuwait erroneously downs US jet. War fear deepening as France allies back Gulf states. Polish envoy backs Nigeria's restaurant, urges ceasefire. Another story on page 16 says Dangote Refinery increased petrol price to 874 naira per litre. A phone tapping equipment claim, a fiction. El-Rufai family fires back at ICPC. You can read that on page 9. I will be Nigeria's first elected female governor, Iyabo Basanjo. The story is on page 10. And another story here says FG begins implementation of executive order on oil gas revenue, page 19. Governors back Tinubu on direct oil revenue remittance to Federation account. The story is on page 8. And the headline says alleged secret bank accounts. CCB summons FHCCB Justice Soho. The story is on page 9. Talking about Federal High Court Chief George. Benin attack. How DSS nabbed suspect over threats to P2B. The story is on page 14 of a Vanguard newspaper. So these are the headlines we have this very morning on these very papers. And the next will be for us to look at analysis and look at the big stories that are getting the most attention. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
You're listening to The Polity. Get involved now.
Okay, thank you for staying tuned to Udala Radio 104.7 FM. It's 9:31 a.m. and you're listening to The Polity on Udala Radio 104.7 FM. My name is Franklin Debekanda with Tony Olisambeki on the analysis desk. We have to begin the analysis now, but just to remind you once more that we are live on our Facebook page, Udala Radio 104.7 FM. You can also listen to us live by visiting our website at www.radioodala.com. You can log on and be able to listen to us live. And any information you need about Udala Radio is also on that very site. Check out our YouTube and the Instagram channels, Udala Radio. Okay, so Tony, let's begin with a story that has been, getting attention since last week. In fact, virtually every day you open the pages of the paper, so you get to see one headline or the other linked to that. I'm talking about the executive order which Mr. President issued, Executive Order 9 on remittance of revenue to FAC account. And this directive was referring to the likes of NMPCL and others. And since that order came about, we have seen some kicks here and there. We have seen different reactions. In fact, Pengassin kicked against it, saying that Mr. President was acting out of bias, that he was violating the provisions of the Petroleum Industry Act. We also saw some lawyers who waded into this very conversation. Some persons backed Mr. President, saying that he was on the right track. Some persons said he cannot just go ahead to use an order to repeal an act which was enacted by the National Assembly. And plenty of things have been said. But the presidency has insisted that Mr. President is on the right track because some provisions of the Petroleum Industry Act are in violation of the Constitution, and if that is the case, the Constitution has to supersede, and that is what Mr. President is doing according to the presidency. But I need just to understand this issue of Executive Order 9 on oil and gas revenue. So Tony, for beginners, what is this talking about, and how is it going to impact the revenue accruable to the 3 tiers of government?
Well, let's begin by explaining what an executive order means. Of course, we have come across this term from time to time. During the time of Muhammadu Buhari, with so many executive orders he issued, but we must take it piecemeal for benefit of those who may not understand this patois, this jargon, these terms. So we have to break it down. When we talk about an executive order, we mean a directive issued by the president to government, ministries, departments, agencies on how to implement existing laws or government policies. Is usually gazetted. That's why it is called executive order. It is issued by the president. Is more loosely translated as a kind of law-making system by the president, but you know very well that the president under the Constitution has executive power. That's why the word executive order is attached, because he is issuing an order, and being the chief executive of the country, the order he issues once gazetted becomes an executive order. So we have thought about this issue of executive order, we are now considering the executive order 9, which Mr. President issued on 13th February 2026, mandating the direct remittance of all oil and gas revenues, including royalty oil, tax oil, profit gas, and other entitlements under the production sharing contracts, both profit sharing and risk service contracts. For us to understand these things, let me break some of these things down. Because when we talk about royalty oil, people may not understand what is royalty oil. When you talk about tax oil, people may not understand what is tax oil. When you also talk about profit oil, people may not understand that. When you talk about profit gas, people may not even understand that. So when you talk about production sharing contracts, that is PSCs, people may not even understand. So whatever point you're trying to make, you leave people more confused. So let's quickly explain some of these things so that people will understand why this is causing controversy. But the grand thing is, the president is trying to say, NNPC, whatever revenue you generate, pay it into the consolidated revenue account of the government for onward sharing amongst the 3 tiers of government. But I'm going to explain these revenues so that people would understand what these revenues are. But we know why they are kicking, because if you go by the provisions of the Petroleum Industry Act, it is something many of these people who are kicking are not comfortable with. Because if you look at that Executive Order 9, it targets provisions in the 2021 Petroleum Industry Act, which allowed the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, NNPCL, to return up to 30% of its profit. Keep back 30% of your profit from PSCs. I'm going to explain. That is the petroleum sharing contracts. I'm going to explain that later on. Just keep 30% of whatever you make out of it for management fees, and other 30% for frontier exploration funds. What it means, you keep 30% as a way of using it to run certain things. Then another 30% again for frontier exploration, for future joint venture. Any company that would want exploration, any company that would want joint business, use it as an upfront, as their own part of joint funding. That is it. That's what the PIA provides for. But let's explain some of these terms so that people can also follow what we are talking about, and the gains that we can as well get from this direct remittance Mr. President has issued, and the legality, that is the legal aspect of it, whether he has acted within his powers or what he did is ultra vires. In essence, when we talk about some of these things, oil revenue, tax revenue, royalty oil, and some of these things, the truth remains that when an oil company comes into your country to drill oil, the oil they drill does not belong to them. It belongs to the country, that is the government. So the government and the oil company agree on how to share the money. If a company comes to explore oil in your country, whatever they're exploring belongs to the government, but they must enter into contract with the government. And when they enter into such contract with the government on how to share the money involved, that contract is called production sharing contract. So production sharing contract is an agreement between the government and an oil company, and the company provides the money and technology to drill. If oil is found, the oil is produced, and that oil so produced is shared between the government and the company based on agreed rules. So whatever they drill, whatever oil they drill, they must share it with the government. That is the production sharing contract. And when you talk about royalty oil, the royalty oil is more like the rent the company must pay for using the country's oil resources. Even before calculating profit, the company must give the government a percentage of that oil produced. That percentage of that oil produced is called royalty oil. When you talk about tax oil, after royalty, the company still has to pay tax to the government. But when they pay that tax with oil, instead of paying tax in cash, the company may pay that tax in oil. That portion of oil used to settle companies' income tax is called tax oil. And when you talk about profit oil, by the time you remove the royalty oil, remove the cost oil, that is the cost oil, is that very cost the company bears in oil exploration. If you remove it, what is left is profit. And that profit oil is what is also being talked about, the profit oil. So this applies to even gas oil, as we have in other case, or even profit gas. By the time you do the same thing, that's profit gas. So in excess, NNPC Limited earns royalty revenue, tax revenue, profit revenue, and some of these things. And when they do earn these things, they return 30% of some of these things for management fees, and also return another 30% for frontier exploration. So, but Executive Order 9 has changed everything, and that is why everybody is kicking. And let me say this: if there is direct remittance, the country inflow may be up to 14.7 trillion per annum, including 7.5 trillion in oil royalties. That's what Nigeria makes from oil royalties per annum, 7.55 trillion, and also 611.42 billion in gas flaring penalties, because you know, for you to flare gases, there are penalties attached to that. But just as we have said earlier on, there is issue of legality. That is legality question.
Yes, whether Mr. President acted right, whether he acted within the ambits of the law, or he acted out reverse.
Now, when we talk about did he act within the ambit of the law, you explain some of these things during your intro. I listened to you, and when you explain these things, you say that the president or the federal government, they are saying that they did what they did based on the provisions of section 44 subsection 3 and also section 162 of the 1999 constitution, which vexed ownership of mineral resources in the federal government and require oil federation revenues to be paid into the federation accounts for distribution. That is what the federal government is saying. I know that very section very well, section 162. All revenue must be paid. That's the way the section provides. Shall be paid into the consolidated revenue. Now, you ask this question. When they were making the PIA law, which was assented by President Muhammadu Buhari, did they not consider that section 162 to feel that section 162 may be in conflict, with the provisions of the PIA? It's very, very unfortunate that we find ourselves in this very long jam. But the truth remains that, Mr. President, just like some people have said, you cannot use executive order to repeal a law you believe that is in conflict with the Constitution. That if a law is in conflict with its Constitution, that law must first and foremost be challenged in a court of law.